Yes. Are you ready to present your paper?
Yes, sir.
First one, Sudipta Saha.
Yes, sir. So, shall I start? So, shall I
Are
start?
you okay now? Can you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Am I clearly audible to you?
Voice is not audible. Unmute your mic,
Am I?
please.
It
Voice is
is.
not audible.
Yes, sir. Am I audible now? Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
sir. Okay.
It's
Uh,
really very interesting. And in the morning session, we had the discussion about the conference and its theme. About the conference was spoken by Professor Pradita Mukherjee, and the keynote was uh, it went well. It was given by Professor Debashish Lahiri, and I welcome the paper presenters as it is online presentation. No, technology is always something. Sometimes we think it is a boon, or sometimes it may be a bane also. Uh, I think that my voice is clear with you, but I am not
yes.
getting your voice. Now may I invite Sudipta Saha to present a
Yes, sir.
paper.
Okay, sir.
Around 10 minutes. Yes,
Okay,
please
sir.
start talking.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon to all of you. My name is Sudipto Shaha. I am a lecturer at the Department of English, Surendranath College, Kolkata.
Your voice is
And
not clear.
uh,
Achi, happened here is not coming. Sound.
am I
Is there
audible
any
now?
sound keys?
Okay, so my paper is titled Following the Annus Horribilis, Examining the Pandemic Experience and the Revival of Dystopian Fiction through Orwell's 1984 and Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale. The dystopian literary genre began to increase rapidly in the last few decades of the 19th century. While the genre has revolved around so many themes, principally taking place in future societies, the single most prolific stimulus to the production of dystopian visions has been the political polarization of capitalism and socialism, in which the majority has been anti socialist. The social perturbations of the postmodern age are prominent, which bridges the convergence of the apocalyptic narrative with the postmodern concept. The presentation of the social degeneration is particularly. Yes, sir. I need to put it on. Okay, I'll just. Am I clearly audible now? Okay. Okay, thank you. I'm just continuing with the last line that I have said now. The social perturbations of the postmodern age are prominent, which bridges the convergence of the apocalyptic narrative with the postmodern concept. The presentation of the social degeneration is particularly significant with the collapse of the civilized society through which with the collapse of the civilized society through the predominance of human time as well as advanced technologies. Dystopian fiction depicts a future in which humanity has fallen into decline and ruin, in which, to the detriment of mankind, large corporations completely rule the world and can dominate the human mind through propaganda, manipulation, disruptive advertisements, and even through technology, in which there is total or partial catastrophic destruction of nature where it can no longer sustain life, in which government is the root of all evil controlling and limiting the movements of its citizens, and in which, as the famous quote line goes, war is peace, freedom is slavery, and ignorance is strength. Orwell's 1984 present a timelessness and predictive power. It serves as a warning against absolute power, where the government lacks checks and balances as well as accountability, and rule in the interest of the rulers than the interest of the people. Dystopian governments, as presented by both Orwell and Atwood, uses illegitimate coercion like force and threats, manipulation of language, which results in the restriction of independent thought, and the disappearance of dissidents in order to stay in power. Like Aldous Huxley and Yevgeny Zamyatin, Orwell saw the threat of dehumanization lurking in unrestrained technological development and visualized a world where machine had triumphed over man. In 1984, whoever controls the past ran the party slogan, controls the future, who controls the present controls the past. George Orwell's claustrophobic work opened our eyes on how regimes work. The book's battered landscape feels more relevant than ever before in the 21st century. Behind a fictional narrative, there is always a real world correlated. Many of Orwell's predictions were frighteningly spot on, from the rise of alternative facts to the increased government surveillance infringing on the rights of privacy. In 1984, the state determined on what should be considered acceptable speech in keeping the nation in order. In present times, a small group of private tech companies are provided with absolute power over what we are permitted to see or say online. In 1984, there were only few countries to which most of the world's population belonged. In present times, most of the world's netizens belong to a few social media empires. In 1984, state conducted surveillance and censored speech. In present times, multitude of human and algorithmic moderators of social media companies closely monitors their users, flagging those who post controversial materials and contradict the will of the state. 4 million copies of Orwell's masterpiece were sold in 1984 because it was, of course, 1984. And in 2017, it got another boost, for which the reason was none other than the 45th President of the United States, Donald Trump. In just 2 weeks into the Trump administration, terms like alternative fact and truth isn't truth started to filter into vernacular and into public consciousness. When the White House press secretary Sean Spicer falsely suggested that Trump's inauguration had seen the largest audience to ever witness an inauguration, period, both in person and around the globe, senior advisor to the president and counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway, used the term alternative facts in order to defend the falsehood in national television interview. Orwell's idea of doublethink meant the acceptance of two contradictory ideas or beliefs at the same time. But in Conway's case, she attempted to equate a lie as merely a different form of fact. Margaret Atwood, who is often dubbed as the prophet of dystopia, defined dystopia as when, I quote, warlords and demagogues take over, some people forget that all people are people, enemies are created, vilified and dehumanized, minorities are persecuted, and human rights as such are shoved to the wall, unquote. The third episode of Hulu's The Handmaid's Tale presents a chilling monologue delivered by its fierce protagonist, Offred. And I quote, Now I'm awake to the world. I was asleep before. That's how we let it happen. Unquote. In just a few lines, the monologue encapsulates why The Handmaid's Tale has found new life more than 30 years after the book was released. Atwood's work presents a dystopian vision of the near future in which the United States has become a fundamentalist theocracy, and the few women whose fertility has not been compromised by environmental pollution are forced into childbearing. Atwood foresaw the cruel abrogation of reproductive freedom. The Trump administration unabashedly aimed to amplify traditional patriarchal and exclusionary values that deny the interior life of women and other marginalized communities. Just a second. The post World War I world had seen rapid economic and industrial growth, which was associated with the new cultural and technological changes, women's suffrage, and consumerism. But the decade of the 1920s ended with the economic collapse and the onset of the Great Depression. The vivid stories of F. Scott Fitzgerald, which presented the roaring 20s of the 20th century, saw optimism, celebration, and enthusiasm, which were also echoed in the beginning of the 21st century as a new decade of prosperity. With the beginning of 2020, the world felt like they have lived the decade of the 1920s, especially the time since the beginning of the Great Depression. In 2020, the world has been traumatized by the COVID 19 virus, which subsequently led to economic collapse, racial division, and political polarization, including ideological distance between the wealthy, the privileged, and the common masses. There was a palpable fear, and the fear was of each other. Frustration with the government increased, and political division hung heavy in the air. There was the rising concern of public health and the sense that we were all in this pandemic alone, but together provided hope to many. And there was also the rising expectation of everything to return to normal soon. This hope can be found similar to the hope of Offred, the narrator of The Handmaid's Tale, who lives in a hopelessly oppressive regime that has been established as the Republic of Gilead, and then finds hope when she learns that an underground network of resistance exists. The COVID 19 pandemic has been considered not only an economic problem, but also a humanitarian problem in the society. It has seriously affected the marginalized sections of the communities due to the social and political fractures within it. COVID 19 has laid bare the cruelties of our society, and it has made the stark contrast between the privileges of the elite and the dreary existence of the working class visible. It has increased racial disparity and discrimination among the people in various parts of the globe. The pandemic unleashed a flood of hate and xenophobia, scapegoating, and fear mongering. Various political parties and far right groups in the United States, Germany, France, United Kingdom, Italy, Spain, and many more have clasped onto the COVID 19 crisis to facilitate white supremacist, anti Semitic, ultranationalist, xenophobic conspiracy theories that threatens refugees, political leaders, individuals of a few particular religion, and foreigners. Physical attacks on Asians and people of Asian origin in the West due to racism have spread with the COVID 19 pandemic. The use of the anti Chinese rhetoric has directly or indirectly encouraged hate crimes. East Asian people are generally being targeted and bullied due to the virus being identified in Wuhan, China. We are also very much familiar with the incident in Atlanta, Georgia, that happened last week, where Asian people were attacked by a person, and there were, I think, 6 casualties, and that was also a hate crime towards the Asian people. Now, to conclude, I would like to just provide you with an example. And this example constitutes the sole country, the United States of America. So, to conclude, the United States of America is the most powerful and most prosperous nation the world has ever seen. But one must think about the problem this very notion creates. Progress is built into the fabric of the country. The country is designed to be improved, guaranteeing people's right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, guaranteeing freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom to protest, freedom to petition the government, freedom to choose the leaders. All these constitute the recipe for progress. One can start out with all kinds of injustices in the society, but as long as people are allowed to call out the injustices and report on them and protest them and demand change and vote for leaders who make the changes one wants, one can make constant progress. People can start with slavery and put an end to slavery. They can start with women not being allowed to vote and change the law. They can have racial segregation and then integration. But we must consider what happens after this. If the society is making constant progress in dealing with the major injustices, then the injustices we have to fight over are constantly being reduced. The better things get, the less there is to fight. It is a part of the human nature. And so people have to fight over minor things. As the most powerful nation in the world, the United States don't face a significant external threat. So it has to find a significant internal threat. If people cannot find a significant internal threat, they will magnify an insignificant internal threat that until it becomes the greatest threat in the history of mankind. People used to fight over slavery, segregation, and now we have to fight over using the wrong gender pronoun. The world used to fight against Nazis for putting Jews into the gas chambers. Now we fight over a simple tweet. If we can't find an actual soldier to fight, we will find a statue of a soldier to fight. If we cannot find an actual hate crime, we will fabricate a hate crime. But whatever happens, human will fight. There is a part of us that wants all the fighting to stop so that we can go on living comfortably with a booming economy. But there is also a part of us that wants to rally around anyone who promises to crush the opposition. In the midst of America's racial reckoning, the question of how to deal with memorials to controversial leaders has risen again. Orwell wrote in 1984, in fear of a public enslaved by an oppressive government seeking to take advantage of the emotions of the governed in order to maintain authority. Orwell did not believe that the world would be ruled by Big Brother in the calendar year 1984, but he often proclaimed that 1984 could happen if man did not become aware of the assaults on his personal freedom and most precious right, that is, the right to have his own thoughts. Finally, in the words of Franz Kafka, I quote, "We live in an age which is so possessed by demons that soon we shall only be able to do goodness and justice in the deepest secrecy, as if it were a crime." Unquote. Thank you so much. Sir, you are inaudible.
Yeah, your
Yes, sir.
presentation went well. Any doubts, explanation,
Yes, sir.
clarification, queries? You want to ask him? Yeah, Professor Debashish Lahiri wants to ask you something. Please be on.
Yes.
Thank you for the paper that you presented. I just
Yes,
want to
sir.
ask you about the point that you made in the paper. You talked about
Sir, you are not audible.
you said
Sir,
that you made a point about the small things mattering. You know, it's about the small things that such huge discourses as dystopia and dystopianism is actually founded on perceptions of small things, mundane realities, routines that you do every day. How those get affected, how those are respond sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously to larger movements in society and in the world. So, could you clarify the point a little bit once again? I mean, I think I couldn't catch the whole of your talk, your presentation, but what was the theoretical grounding that you were looking at? That's it. You talked about the little things and big mattering.
sir, sir, I couldn't hear your question properly. It was partially not clearly audible.
Sari is asking about that. That while you were presenting something, you have mentioned about the trivial things, but he thinks that they what you mentioned, they may not be the trivial things. What trivial things you mentioned at that time? We had some audio problem. Can you elaborate it?
For the dystopian part, I had suggested that the dystopian fiction depicts a future in which humanity has fallen into decline and ruin, in which, to the detriment of mankind, large corporations have completely ruled the world and can dominate the human mind through propaganda, through manipulation, and through disruptive advertisements, and even through technology, and also where there is total or partial catastrophic destruction of nature, where it can no longer sustain life, where there is what do I say? There is a negative feeling for the government, where the government is seen as the root of the evil, root of all evil, controlling and limiting the movements of its citizens. And also, I had presented a quote from Orwell's 1984, that specifically, where war is peace, freedom is slavery, and ignorance is strength. This is what George Orwell presents in 1984. And along with this, I had said in the last part, after when I said the COVID-19 pandemic, how the Asians are being seen through the as the carriers of the COVID-19 pandemic all over the world. Even previously, in the last week only, if we see the hate crime that occurred in Atlanta, Georgia, so that is also a hate crime driven out by the hate towards the Asian people, because of the rhetoric that has been presented by the former president of the United States, Donald Trump, who always never used to say it is COVID-19 virus. He always used to say it is Wuhan virus or China virus. So basically, the East Asian people are being attacked because of this, because of the rhetoric that has been presented by some in power. And also, I had said that to fight over the less important things have become a part of the human nature now. Okay, because if we cannot find a significant internal threat, where I have given the example of the United States of America, where a significant external threat is, I would say, not nearly impossible, but uh, not possible for a longer time. Okay, not possible in order to attack a country like the United States of America. But if people cannot find a significant internal threat, they will magnify an insignificant internal threat until and unless it becomes a greater threat in the history of mankind. That I had focused on in my conclusion, and specifically how the internal threats are being energized through various leaders specifically. As I had given the example of Donald Trump, who used the rhetoric of the East Asian people carrying the coronavirus. Over to you, sir.
Dipto, that
Yes,
was an
sir.
interesting answer, but what I wanted to know was, do you think that the watchtowers from where Big Brother watches us has shifted from very public spheres to very internecine and private spheres? Uh, does the experience of the pandemic over the last year in any way color your judgment or any commentary on the facts that you can make? Of course, you have been reading some classic dystopian texts in your paper, including Orwell's, but just looking at the situation as it has unfolded over the last year, do you think that this has changed, that the panopticon is located not in a public space but within very sanctimonious private spaces?
Yes, sir. By private spaces, I mean specifically in the household, because as we see that the COVID-19 pandemic and because of the lockdown nationwide, worldwide, people were forced to just go into their house, shut themselves up, and work day and night from home. Now, this working from home has increased the use of more technology. And with this use of more technology, the surveillance has also increased. The surveillance, because of this COVID-19 pandemic, when almost from a small child, from a kid going to the nursery classes to class 12 and beyond, to the higher education, the students going to the higher education, from office people, those even who are doing even those who are not doing the frontline jobs. Apart from that, even even a person who is specifically, I'm talking about the person who is going to a job which provides him 10,000 rupees a month, even to a person which provides even to the job which provides the person 1 lakh rupees. All of them are working at home using some kind of technology. And as these technologies have the using of the technologies have increased in the household, in the private spaces, the surveillance has also increased. So at this specific time, people before the pandemic, where people hello yes, people before the pandemic were only I would say not limited, because somewhere I had read that India is the second most internet has the second most internet users in the world. So maybe not before the pandemic, but during the pandemic, and now we are also continuing. If we say that this is the post-pandemic year, though it is not over, it is the post-pandemic year, the use of technology has gradually increased. And when the use of technology has gradually increased, the surveillance has also increased. The surveillance, the tech companies have also been provided, and the tech companies are also being regulated by the governments, by some governments, in order to keep a tab on the people who are using tech and in what way. We have specifically seen in many ways people commenting on Twitter, people commenting on Facebook, and they are being tracked down because the government is using those human or algorithmic moderators in order to flag those controversial statements. And specifically when it is happening in our very own private space 24 into 7, this has become much easier. Uh, this flagging up of the controversial materials, this putting up of the controversial materials that people are posting or people are reading, has become much more easier in order to through the surveillance. I hope I have answered your question right.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, Sudipta, sir, yeah,
Yes, sir.
you have given the appropriate answer.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Now we move to the second presenter of this, Navanita Karanje. Yes, introduce
Sir,
yourself and yeah,
am I audible, sir?
yes, clear.
Hello.
It's very clear.
Okay. Okay. Very good afternoon to respected organizers, my fellow paper presenters, and audience members. I am Navanita Karanjay, research scholar at Bakura University, and my paper is titled Medical Subalterns in Kazuo Ishiguro's Never Let Me Go. So, the onslaught of the pandemic has really forced us to take account of the body, or the presence of the body in culture and in life, and in daily life, something that we generally take for granted. And Ishiguro in Never Let Me Go makes a very important point by highlighting the presence of the body through the use of clones. Okay, so subalterns, as we know, the word subaltern has been coined by Antonio Gramsci, and the Latin roots of the word sub, meaning below, and alternus, meaning all others, refers to the section of society that is subjected to the hegemony of the ruling classes. Writing has more or less always taken the most powerful of society, or the ones who have the greatest agency, as their center. And especially when the focus of narration is on anything related to health or disease, the health of a single individual is seen as the as emblematic of the health of the greater body politic. And only when the health of the individual is restored, it is by extension the health of the greater body politic is also being restored. However, by focusing on just the idea of health and not on the idea of body in culture, the there has been a problematization of the absence of the body in both in artistic discourse and in cultural discourse. So, while talking about Ishiguro's use of clones to highlight this problematic, I will refer to Michel Foucault's *The Birth of the Clinic*, where he explores the emergence of the medical tradition as we know it today. So, the medical tradition as we know it today came into being in the 17th century, and it proliferated in the late 18th and 19th centuries, where was medicine and diseases were first classified on the basis of similarity and difference. More towards the end of the 19th century, the use of technological apparatuses such as stethoscope, the X-ray, the microscope, which made the body more visible to the medical practitioners, caused medicine to shift the focus from the entire body to the particular cause of the disease, that is the particular lesion, or the particular the cluster of tissues that was causing the disease in the body. And therefore the disease came to be regarded as nothing but a trail of symptoms that is traveling across the framework of the body, and which needed to be eradicated to restore the body to its state prior to the appearance of the disease that has caused the sickness. This resulted in the separation of the self from the body, because for medicine and for the conceptualization of health, it is only the particular disease that was being looked at, and not at the other factors that perhaps induced the disease in the first place. Therefore, the clinical gaze, the term that has been coined by Foucault encompasses not only the particular system of knowledge regarding the disease, but also the many methodologies that render the body visible and make the body a static entity that can be penetrated and manipulated to bring the body to a desired state. Now, Ishiguro's use of clones as the corrective to this form of eradicating disease actually shows the removal of the body from the cultural discourse. We see in Ishiguro's novel how the three clones, Kathy, Tommy, and Ruth, they remember their experiences in Hailsham and try to piece together their identity, piece together their experiences to locate their origins. And it is very interesting how they find that the presence of art or the times when they were encouraged to create art was the times when they were regarded as equivalent to those who were not raised in institutions like Hailsham. And it is very interesting that the materials from which they made art were discarded materials. They made art out of discarded tin cans or discarded paper, and the use of those discarded material and garbage mirrors their own position in the dystopian society of Ishiguro's novel. Because once they give up, Ishiguro uses the phrase called up. He says Tommy and Kathy, they were called up for donations. Once they are called up, they complete their cycle of donation, and then they are systematically discarded by the dystopian society. And while the gallery that is managed by the person called Madame in Ishiguro's novel, the gallery, while it is the aim of the gallery is to show the interiority of the clones, at the same time we see Kathy and Tommy coming to the realization that their art has come to a naught, because according to the Guardians, people change, and the public opinion changed against the clones, and as a result, they could not get the deferral that they were hoping for. Now, here I would like to read out a line from Ishiguro's novel, which brings to the fore the humanity of the clones. And this is the Madame, Madame who is speaking when Kathy and Tommy go to speak for their deferral, that is for postponing the date of their final donation so that they can spend more time together. She says that the situation is when she saw a young Kathy cradling a doll in the manner of a mother cradling an infant, and she realizes that because the clones were made or manufactured only to provide fresh body parts for those who had failed organs in society, they were not designed, or I'm deliberately using the word manufacture and design to point to the society's involvement in creating this inhuman method to fight disease. She says that I saw a new world coming rapidly, more scientific, more efficient, very good, but a harsh, cruel world. And I saw a little girl, her eyes tightly closed, holding to her breast the old kind world, one that she knew in her heart could not remain, and she was holding it and pleading never to let her go. So, Never to Let Her Go is the title of Ishiguro's novel, and this will to never let go on the part of Kathy, Tommy, and Ruth acts as a shocking reminder to the guardians who belong to the echelons of society who perhaps devised such a method of fighting sickness in the first place, it acts as a shocking reminder of the humanity of the clones to the guardians. And ultimately, the privileging of art as a signifier of the interiority of the clones falls flat because their art comes to a naught. Again, paradoxically, Ishiguro uses his art, Ishiguro is making use of his expertise as a novelist to put forward the necessity of the body, the necessity of putting the body more visible in artistic discourse so that it is not effaced and erased, just as the clones were being erased in the dystopian society that Ishiguro paints for us in his novel. So therefore, I would like to conclude on the point that the narrative use of clones is therefore emblematic of the refusal to discuss the body on its own terms, because the presence of the clones in the society acts as a reminder of death, disease, and mortality, which are quotidian aspects of the human condition. However, in their race to transcend the human condition, the guardians are themselves denying their own humanity, while at the same time manufacturing these human beings to act as repositories for fresh organs and denying them their humanity in the process. So there needs to be more discussion and more greater presence given to the body and disease in art and in cultural discourse, so that we might be more aware of the body and not remain not just the body, but be aware of the materiality of being human that is hitherto very much lacking in art. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
Clarifications from the participants, online and offline. Dr. Ashok, any observations? Yeah, Navneeta Karanjai, I have.
Yes, sir.
I'm expecting a clarification from you, of course. It may be related to you, and it's like expansion. Can you come across queer theory, the late 90s? And before that, queer theory is talking about something body, mind, and materialistic versus spirituality. How do you look at your presentation in the light of queer theory?
Queer theory has more or less focused on the presence of sexuality in cultural discourse, and so the body is definitely present there. Even then, perhaps the idea of disease or the body as something that can be flawed, or it may not function properly, that a person can be suffering from a disease, uh, and how the very idea of disease is reflected in cultural discourse through medicine. That was the focus of my paper. So yes,
Did you
queer
come
theory
across that queer
also.
theory? Did you come across
Yes,
the
I
queer
have.
theory? Have you read it? Have you read it?
Yes, but my paper does not is not talking about any queer aspects of
Yes, I'm
existence
talking
here.
about the changing dynamics of 21st century. When we look at the text, we cannot identify any single identity. There are multiple identities,
Yes,
uh,
yes,
right? But literature is always shows the different avenues to look at the same text from different perspectives,
true, true.
right?
So there are
Can you
no
comment
queer
on this?
relation. Um, there are from my reading of Ishiguro's novel, I have not found any queer aspect of queer relationship in within Ishiguro's novel, but the body uh, does figure quite prominently in queer theory. So yes,
No,
it can
I'm
be.
expecting a phrase from you. In fact, I'm not talking about body and physical things, and beyond that, I'm expecting the theoretical framework like a matriarchal society, how patriarchy itself gives the patriarchal framework to the women, and how unknowingly talking about these things. I'm expecting that phrase. In fact,
Oh, I don't think I have come across that phrase. That.
a
So my
person
focus here.
Devashish wants to
Yes, sir.
question a clarification type of thing.
Okay, sir.
Navanita, you talked about the whole body and the diseased body.
Yes, sir.
Uh, just to go back, I mean, even forgetting the specific context of the Ishiguro text, if we go back in the history of culture, especially Western culture, the body of
Yes, sir.
Christ has
Yes, sir.
always been seen as a very ambiguous entity. You see, before crucifixion and after crucifixion, his body having been brought down, you see, several people, I mean, they thought that this was a pestilent body, and this has been commented on a lot. The
Okay, sir.
the whole unharmed, unpenetrated body of Christ, pristine body of Christ before crucifixion, and the body of Christ with the stigmata, the blood, the suffering etched on him, the nervous torment that he went through, always seen as some kind of a defiled body. And in some apocryphal texts, it was purified. The story goes that it was body had to be purified with several oils and other unguents having been used. Uh, and this entire story about Christ rising from the dead is actually to counter this myth that Christ had succumbed to the greatest disease ever known to man, and that is death. Death is the greatest disease that had defiled his body, and he had to be purified, cleansed out of that. So his rising was seen as that. Do you see this kind of a very archetypal pattern with regard to the body of Christ, the Eucharist, if you might put it that way, as somehow surviving in the text by Ishiguro? Any shadows, long shadows being cast of that kind of a myth in Ishiguro's text?
Indeed, the clones are definitely used as sacrifices to restore the health of those afflicted by failing organs in Ishiguro's novel. And the very and for me, the very act of trying to restore Christ's body to his pristine state is a denial of disease and mortality as the two aspects of the human condition. So, trying to restore Christ's body to its to a state prior to his crucifixion um, would be would be to deny would be is the attempt to deny the body, the presence of the body in discourse, and the presence of the clones to replace the organs is doing the same thing, is performing the same function. Sorry. So yeah, that is all I can say, sir.
Yes, Nabanita Karanjay, it's a good presentation.
Thank you, sir.
You have covered many areas and done good job. Keep it up.
Thank you, sir.
Now may request the third presenters of the session, Dr. Partha Biswas. Are you ready with this?
Yeah, actually, because of shortage of the light,
Not visible.
I
Not
think I'm
visible.
not visible properly because shortage of the light, I think.
Dr. Partha, can you switch on the light? I'm unable to see you.
Just give me a few minutes, please, sir.
Dr. Biswas, shall we start now? Yeah, before your presentation, may I
Yes,
know
people here?
something? What about Mandal, Prabodh Mandal?
Yeah, Prabodh Mandal is with me, but we are sharing the same laptop. That's why he is not able to log in with the same thing. But just after me, we'll log in and he will continue his session.
Okay, okay, you can continue now.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Myself, Partha Biswas, and my topic is dystopian diplomacy, the post-millennial crisis of Jerusalem. Basically, my area of focus is actually the crisis which is intractable global factor, and the both Israel and the Palestine claims that Jerusalem is their political capital and as a sacred religious site. Basically, the city's status has been disputed officially since the 1948 Arab-Israel war. And if we are going to the background of the particular Jerusalem city, it is related the 1517 when it comes under the Ottoman Empire. And after the 1917, the British established their colonial dynasty in the particular holy city. after the British mandate, the Jerusalem comes under the clear scanner of the Vatican, France, and obviously the Russia itself. And since the 1948 Arab-Israel war, before that, the United Nations had also designated Jerusalem as the special international zone where both the pilgrims of the Palestine and the Israel are allowed to pray their worships. And during the war, Israel also seized the city's western half, which is basically sharp contrast of the international acclaimed international zone, which is being declared by the United Nations. This is clear contrast. And at the same time, 1967, the historical Six-Day War, again Israel annexed the eastern part of the particular city, and that dispute has been described as the one of the foremost intractable issue within the India-Palestine conflict. However, early 21st century, the global think tank expressing a viewpoint on the city's final status, which has been shown, is the clear signs of the fragile. I just want to come on the particular time frame to precise my paper, which is come to the 1947, when United Nations adopted the resolution of 181, which is clear the British mandate, which is been withdrawn from the Palestinian side, and the entire Palestine has been clearly divided in the particular three areas. One is the state of the Israel, and the particular geographical region which is being disputed, the beside of the Jordan River, and also the Palestinian portion, which is included the West Bank and the Gaza. And that particular partition plan is completely refused by the Arab League and the Palestinian countries, Arab countries. Over the subsequent years, tension rose within the region, particularly between the Israel and the Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. At the same time, in the year of 1956, the Suez crisis and the Israel invasion of the Sinai River, Egypt and Jordan, which is also the mutual defense pacts in anticipation of a possible mobilization of the Israel troops. Just after a few years, in the year of 1967, just I earlier mentioned here, the Six-Day War between the Arab and Israel, following a series of maneuvers by Egyptian President Abdul Nasser, who is also a very renowned key figure, which we can refer him as the one of the very prominent leader in the Palestinian side. It is also the same time, I can say, the primitively attacked Egyptian and Syrian air forces starting the Six-Day War. And the Six-Day War, after the war, Israel gained the territorial control over the Sinai River and the Gaza Strip. Here itself, I can also would like to mention the 1979, a series of ceasefire and peace negotiations also been initiated in the clear interference of the United Nations. But certainly, another surprise we have seen that in 1980, Israel also declared the Jerusalem Law. That Jerusalem Law is being passed in the Senate of the Israel, and there Israel clearly declared the entire Jerusalem city is being completely under the sovereignty of Israel. No other country or no other any international interference they will accept it as the international proclamation, which is clearly being adhered there. Even though the Camp David Accords, Oslo I, which is constituted in 1993, Oslo II, which is constituted in 1995, that all the accords is clearly expanded the primary agreement, adding the provision that is completely mandate the whole withdrawal of the Israel from the 6 cities, including the 450 towns within the West Bank. But surprisingly, in 2000, in the year of 2000, which is sparked partially by the Palestinian grievances over the Israel's control and the West Bank and Gaza, which is significantly seen that a series of attack has been constituted by the Israeli side. Entire United Nations and the rest of the world accepting the United Nation, except the Trump administration, I mean the United States and some few countries, except them, all the rest of the world condemned this surprising attack on the very fellow civilians of the Gaza and West Bank. So in 2013, I'm just coming to the latest trend of my area. In 2013, US attempted to revive the social process between the Israeli government and the Palestinian Authority within the West Bank and that particular controversial area. I mean, the Jerusalem city, its east sect and the western sect. However, the peace talks were disrupted when the Palestinian Authority formed a unified government with this rival faction of Hamas in 2014. We have seen in 2014 the Hamas attack and the PLO attack on the side which is being controversial in the eyes of international global factor. And in one or in very two major Palestinian political parties was designated a remote foreign terrorist organization by the US in 1997. And when 2008 in May, we have seen the Hamas and Israeli military conflicted with each other in a very devastating means. Militants in Gaza fired over 200, almost 100 rockets in the Israel. A few civilians, almost 10 to 15 civilians are being neutralized there. In the Israel side, responded to the strike on over 50 targets in Gaza itself. There also, it's a dystopian life and livelihood is being threatened by the both sides attack. And finally, the peace to prosperity, which is a very historical declaration by the America, the Trump administration, which resurfaced and amplified the conflict, because the peace to prosperity, the declaration made by the America, which is a very long awaited, and the plan is completely rejected by the Palestinian and the rest of the world, because it's maybe a possible deal of the century. President Donald Trump's peace to prosperity plan does not leave its name, and it's clearly there is a chance to annexation, clear fresh annexation to the Palestinian side or the other side, which is controversial and referred as the need to designated or need to interfere by the United Nations or some other international organization. It's truly innovative components what United States made. But the thing is that Oslo 1 and Oslo 2, both the agreement which is made between the Palestinian side or the primary intifada, I mean the revolt made by the Palestinian people against the Israeli government, and the second intifada, which is the another revolt which is made in the Oslo 2, made by the 19th century. That is also in the clear contrast or clear contrary in the peace of prosperity which is made by the American side. The Arab legislature or the Arab League has completely dismissed the peace plan as insufficient for the Palestinian independence. Nevertheless, Asian nation, Egypt, Qatar, and the other United Arab Emirates have all issued the statement against this such peace to prosperity, so-called peace to prosperity section. Here I am coming the time frame of latest trend of the conflict. 6 December 2017, world could be the surprised when the United States President Donald Trump declared US recognized the Jerusalem city as the Israeli capital, and his decision to maneuver the embassy there from Tel Aviv. And that particular declaration is being condemned, first condemned and clearly stated by the French President Emmanuel Macron, that this is nothing but a clear threat to the Middle East peace process. The series of statement comes by the other diplomats or other I mean the key figures who are the associate with this particular process, and all the Arab leagues and Muslim countries expressed their clear rejection on that particular choice. The step was also refuted by all European countries apart from the European nation. Even the Palestinian President Muhammad Abbas cancelled his meeting with the US diplomats. At the same time, if I can say from the side of Indian diplomat also stated clearly as their foreign policy which is being designed or the architect by the Nehruian time, that not to be involved with any power bloc of the world. And that is also a very famous historical step of non-alignment movement, which is led by the Jawaharlal Nehru. Here also India shows their intention not to involve in any kind of such international factor which is clearly not stated by the United Nations, or which is not clearly resolved by both the countries. It is clearly depends upon their bilateral dialogues and the negotiation. And finally, in September, 20th December, in particular 2020, the US permanent envoy, the Nikhil Harle, tweeted in his particular official handle that there will be a criticizing in our choice, definitely. But US taking the stance to concerning the 193 Nation Assembly, that it is clear threatening of cutting aid to the countries voting in favor of the draft resolution, which is decided by the UNGA. And finally, in 2020 August, in 2020 September, the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, by the clear influence of the America, initiated the normalized relation with the Israel, and the Jerusalem still a center of a great controversy and a global factor of controversy made by the clear support of US and some other countries, which I can say also the England and the France, they are also been very much involved with this particular process. Still the Jerusalem holy city, the conflict over the holy city is being already constituted and continued, and the final hypothesis of that particular area, I can say that with a very positive note, if Israel and the Arabian League will constitute and refer the Oslo I and Oslo II and the Camp David Accord, the problem, the conflict can be resoluted, can be constituted, and can be come to the particular strategic resolution can be made with the particular thinking of the agreement made by all the countries which is concerned with that particular area. Thanks, that's all. Sir, your sound is not audible. I think your mic is muted.
I had only one question to start off with. Yeah, Professor Biswas. That is, are there any winners in war? And the dystopia of victory, is it more horrible than the dystopia of defeat, the dystopia of war? We've been talking about the city of Jerusalem, the resting of the initiative, and several initiatives, of course, between such forces as Israel itself and America. The question of dystopia as it constitutes itself. So, especially vis-a-vis war, that's why I wanted to start off by asking you, are there any winners in war? In any war, for that matter.
Exactly.
I mean, there is obviously a political explanation, and there is what you might say a justification, a legitimization of action. But then, are there any winners in war in terms of the human casualties and the costs of war? So, if you could start your response from there, and then kind of quickly outline for us how you see this developing as a dystopian context.
Sir, actually, as per my concern and what I have seen there, any kind of conflict which is made, either it is bilateral or it is multilateral, the dystopian concept which is being perpetuated and which is being very much concerned with the civilians who are living there, whose livelihood is in threat because of this such kind of arms racism, which is a weaponry conflict made by the countries, the annexation, the invasion made by the countries for uh, uh, what I can say, for the annexation, intentional annexation, or to resolve the matter with the in front of the gun, or to resolve the matter avoiding the diplomatic process, or to focus or to show their military superiority. But actual the dystopian life is being, or the injustice or the suffering is completely comes to the those people, those civilians, or those soldiers who are basically forced to do these things.
Professor Biswas, am I audible to you? Can you
Yes,
hear
sir,
me?
you are audible. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, so I got your explanation. But forgetting about the old Israel-Palestine binary, and how do you see global culture, political culture, and culture per se, as responding to science? Because you see, the US involvement that you talked about, especially in the politics of the Middle East, the Palestinian crisis, the role of Israel in the entire region. Do you think these third party incursions, political incursions, obviously for a more global political control, as you can understand? I mean, the Middle East has been a hotbed of these kinds of politics, with conflicting European powers trying to wrest the initiative, America trying to wrest the initiative. This has always happened. Now, this kind of going beyond the pales of one's country and trying to control the politics of an entire region far away from where you are, your geographical location. Do you see that as another symptom of the hydra-headed dystopia that we are facing, the hydra-headed prospects of dystopia that we are facing? Being, I think, from the Department of Defense Studies, Strategic Studies, how do you see this problem as emerging?
So this problem is really, if I will say very factually, this problem is unavoidable. And if you are say that the political prospect of this problem is really very disheartening, and I can say that
Professor Biswas, could you
if
unmute
we,
your microphone? I think it is muted. Could you unmute your microphone?
yeah, this is it is unmuted, sir. You are not audible. Hello, I am audible, sir. Hello, am I audible? Hello.
Hello. Am I being audible,
Hello.
Dr. Biswas?
Am I audible, sir? Hello.
I actually can't hear you. That's the problem. Could you check your microphone, please?
Yeah, it is unmuted all. Hello.
Is your microphone unmuted?
Yes, it is unmuted.
But I think
Hello.
I'm not getting to hear you.
Hello. Hello. Am I audible, sir?
Anyway, thank you, Professor Biswas. It was very nice talking to you. Can we now shift to the last presenter of the session, Mr. Prabodh Mandal?
Hello.
I think he's presenting from your end, Mr. Biswas.
Yeah, he's with me also. So am I audible? Then only he can able to talk. Hello.
Yes, yes, you're audible. You're audible. You're audible.
Yes, yes. Prabodh Mandal is with me only.
Yeah. Okay. So can you please now set the stage?
Prabodh da, boss.
রাখবে নাকি? Good afternoon, everybody. My respect and best wishes to all present online and offline.
Afternoon.
I'm Mr. Prabodh Mandal from West Bengal, and at the same time, I want to mention here that being an islander or insider of Sundarbans, I'm here presenting and not taking the points from books, but readily I gain experience from my own land. Practically, my land's name is Sajilia in Gosaba block. That is the remotest corner of Sundarbans. India, that is the remotest corner of Indian Sundarbans. So my topic is decoding the dystopian biodiversity in Sundarbans and its conservation in mangrove ecosystem. The Sundarbans covered about 10,000 square kilometer within the delta of the rivers Ganga, Brahmaputra, and Meghna is shared between India and Bangladesh, which is world's largest coastal soil. The realm experiences a subtropic monsoonal climate with associated annual rain of almost 2,000 millimeter and severe cyclonic storms. It is our greatest greenery well of defense against nature's fury. Its hardy mangroves stand like a protector on its coastal battling, raising winds and waves. This region is thought to contain varied species of animals, birds and reptiles, cheetal, crocodile, snakes, together with Royal Bengal tiger, for which the Sundarban is famous. However, its biodiversity continues to be vulnerable by a growing human population that not solely places with pressure on its biological resources, additionally impacts on the fresh inflows from upstream areas. The Sundarbans, a fragile ecosystem housing on among the most important stretch of mangrove forests that gives a range of ecosystem services and must be protected. On the other hand, there is the impact of human action within the region, which depends on the climate change-induced adaptation challenges of the population within the absence of required development initiatives, social equity, and governance system. It is observed that despite several rules and policies passed for conserving the mangrove forest, encroachment within the protected area for agriculture and extraction of resources continues and is aggravating the pressure on the ecosystem, challenging threats of ecosystem collapse. The Sundarbans mangrove ecosystem in India is remarked as endangered by a world team of researchers using the IUCN's Red List of Ecosystems framework. The clearing of mangroves dating back to the 1800s and decreasing fish populations were the most historical threats. Ongoing threats like global climate change and reduced freshwater supply may further imperil the ecosystem. They say, such as India scientists from various countries, Australia, Singapore, Japan, and UK, caution the Indian Sundarbans ecosystem using the Red List of Ecosystems framework designed by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature to understand an ecosystem's risk of collapse. The framework is analogous to the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species. It is also noted that the complete Sundarbans has been designated as a biosphere reserved by the central government. In addition, the area is remarked as protected forest for tiger conservation and for the protection of the coastal zone are being patronized directly by the central government. The inhabited areas are governed by the authorities. This is often a cause for communication breakdown, loss of your time and resources, and duplication of labor between the central and state forces. Further, the absence of a plan of conservation for the region, despite the presence of two planning agencies, the Sundarban Development Authority and therefore the Sundarban Development Board, functional for past around 30 years, has drawn criticism from the event workers within the region. Even the researchers' evaluation describes key threats to mangrove ecosystems starting from agriculture and agriculture biological resource use such as honey collection, hunting and poaching of tigers, temperature change like enhanced salinization thanks to sea level rise, the severity of cyclones and drought, natural system modifications, dams, barrages, embankments, pollution including accidental spills during oil transportation. Similarly, as residential and commercial development continued among clearing, long-term, hands-on and novel monitoring programs like the Sundarbans Biological Observatory Statistics are crucial. The researchers note in their evaluation. Funding and capacity issues remain crucial barriers to achieving monitoring magnificent goals. Populated since the 8th century, intensification of land use and mangrove clearing increased from the late 19th century and continued throughout the 20th century. Historically, the mangroves were estimated to be 6,588 square kilometers in 1776 and 6,068 square kilometers in 1873. These estimates suggest that the extent of mangroves has declined by 71.9% from 1776 to 2016, classifying the ecosystem as endangered. Theological interpretations suggest that on the Sundarbans, both in India and Bangladesh, lost 24.55% of mangroves erosion over the past 3 decades. The loss of low land because of erosion is resulting in a right-of-way loss within the mangrove forests. Since 1987, the declaration of the world as a World Heritage Site, together with other management and conservation tools, has helped to stabilize the mangrove area. The threats to mangrove forests haven't completely gone away, but the need reduced within the last 50 years. Recent research-supported satellite data indicates that the amount of mangroves within the Sundarbans spanning India and Bangladesh has been reduced significantly within the last 30 years. However, there is evidence of a decline within the health of about 25% of the mangrove trees. Equally, areas are going to be more exposed to harm within the future, especially if extreme events like cyclones become more common. The assessment reflects concern over the continuing declines in juvenile fish populations. Fish workers' unions have blamed depleting fish cap for affecting the livelihood of the normal fishing communities and fueling migration to the geographical area of India in recent years. According to the most data, the tiger count within the Sundarbans India for the year 2019-2020 rose to 96 from 88 in 2018 and 2019. However, the report cautions that despite efforts by forest departments of both countries, joint patrolling and joint management activities have yet to commence. in our rush to use waterways for economic transportation, we have to watch out that these don't become barriers to tigers and elephants and wildlife that supporting them for sustainable income generation capacity and decreasing their dependence on the conserved area. This is able to require extensive planning that considers the challenges of all spheres of development and socioeconomic pressures. All alignment with the impacts of global climate change on the forest and lives of the people. The design process will have to include integrated efforts to restricting growth of population within the region. Policies targeted at universal education, eradication of gender bias, and ladies' empowerment will have to be strengthened to curb the growing pressure on the ecosystem. To address the region's conservation challenges, internalization of a development plan with strong components toward land management, sustainability of natural resources, disaster management, and livelihood management within the context of temperature changes imperative. Substantial focus must be placed on relocating and rehabilitating the population living in critically vulnerable areas of the islands. Identified supported a zone-wise vulnerability assessment of the region. Given the importance of embankments on the living conditions of individuals, the government will have to take initiative to reconstruct embankments, supported renewed designs with the land and soil conditions, using raw materials which will withstand the high intensity
Mr. Mandal,
weather events.
Mr. Mandal,
Okay, sir.
hello.
Yes, sir. Hello, sir.
Could you please end
I
in
can
a
hear
couple
you,
of
sir.
Yeah.
Okay,
Could you
sir.
please wind up in a couple
Finished.
of minutes?
I'll come to an end. Okay, sir. Let me finish this. Finish, sir. Environmental scientists and economists are raising concerns on the shortage of coming up with that has hurt the region and has docked the ecosystem at the edge of its carrying capacity. It has been attributed to the region's administration that's handled by multiple agencies which were founded to support implementation of national and international conservation initiatives attached to the Sundarbans. This is also I have prepared for the presentation today.
Thank you, Mr. Mandal. I
Okay, thank you,
had
sir.
one question for you.
Yes, sir.
Since we are talking about dystopia and you are
Yeah.
talking about climate change and the depletion of natural resources, how do you think the prospect of a world without the natural order and the cultures that have spawned from that order? You know, I'm talking about uh, indigenous cultures. I'm talking about people very close to the soil whose daily lives and livelihood are entirely dependent on the ecosystem.
Yeah.
How do you think they see the future in prospect? And do you think any attempts have been made to somehow harness their perspectives and their perceptions of how the future is going to be like?
Sorry, sir. The last point I can't catch.
What I'm trying to say is that have any attempts been made to harness the fears, perceptions, the outlook of these people who stand to lose the most if ecosystems are destroyed rampantly.
If the ecosystems are gone in rack and ruin, the people in Sundarbans have to protect themselves by taking different initiatives, like making embankments, like producing alternative livelihood. Because mainly we see the people in Sundarbans practically depend on fishing or prawn collection or manual labor. But this is not all, because if I remember, more or less 30 days ago, a tidal waves rose over the Gosaba in the village named Sonargaon. So all over the, we can say, the time immemorial, from the time immemorial, a struggle for existence. The Darwinism theory that the poverty versus necessity. We feel the bubble of man's precarious being in juxtaposition with the endless stress of time. We view the bubble of man's precarious being here. Naturally, the man have to fight, and they are born there just to fight. We can hear at a point like the Prince Dema, we feel profoundly dissatisfied with the multitudinousness, Sikhari, Drazeri. In spite of that, people are fighting and fighting, and this is their life. And they are habituated with the fighting or battling with the natural climate and disasters around the clock.
Thank you, Mr. Mandal. Thank you so much for your clarification. It
Okay,
is
thank you,
often
sir.
seen that that the fate of both nature and people closest to nature is determined by the decisions of people who are farthest from them. So on that note, we end proceedings for the first day. Thank you very much
Yes,
to
sir.
all the presenters on the first
Thank you,
OPP
sir.
session that we had, online platform presentation that we had at our conference today. Sudipta Shaha, Nabanita Karanjai, Prabodh Mondal, and Partha Vishas. Thanks to all of you. Thank you very much to all of you. And we come to the end of today's
Thank you, sir.
proceedings. But we end with a promise that we'll be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. with day 2 of Living Dystopian International Conference from OUCIP Hyderabad. Good day, good evening, and we'll
Good
see you
evening,
tomorrow
sir.
again.
Okay,
Thank you so
sir.
much,
See you again
Akash,
tomorrow.
and the backend staff as well. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.